Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm your host Joe Rimmer and joining me today is Ian Doyle. How are we, Ian?
I'm okay, yourself, Joe?
I'm not too bad. And Beth Lindop, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Nice to see you. Welcome to the Blood Red podcast. Liverpool are back top of the league. Well, they were knocked off very briefly by Man City after a 3-1 win over Burnley on Saturday. Trickier than it sounded. I think we both predicted 3-1.
We both predicted 3-1, and I would like to point out that in my assessment of what I thought was going to happen, Burnley are very good until the final third, where they can't seem to score many goals, and they're not very good at set pieces, which is exactly what happened.
Fair play, yeah. But
I'm taking that as a rare victory for me.
Yeah, rare victory. Liverpool will finish 5th this season. Was another one of your predictions.
Not over yet. It's not over yet.
Not going to stop reminding people.
It's not over
that.
yet. But I'm the one who's reminding people as well. It's a good example of how well they've been doing. Yeah. If I thought they were going to finish 5th, that they are top of the league with 14 games to go is quite good going.
A good example of how much of a pessimist you are. Maybe.
I would like to think of it as though I have inspired them to greater heights than many would have anticipated.
Well, why we are reminding people, we are live on YouTube, live on Facebook. So if you've got a question, pop it in the comments on Facebook. Our producer Ian will send them to me, and on YouTube, I'm keeping an eye myself. So we'll have a look there.
You're keeping an eye on yourself.
Yeah, well, I am quite literally, and also keeping an eye on the comments. And if you are watching on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, press the bell to get notifications. It will all help us very much, and we would very much appreciate it. So thanks for listening. We'll start with you, Ian. A trickier test than perhaps many might have expected against
Apart from me and you. Me and you, yeah.
But Liverpool got the job done, and sometimes that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, you look at City's game, which I did watch almost all of it, actually, against Everton, where they weren't particularly great.
Rubbish, wasn't it? It was a rubbish game to watch.
I wouldn't say it was a rubbish game to watch. I just think it was a game where Everton were pretty comfortable until City scored. And that was the end of that, because you knew Everton weren't going to score by that point. But then to be fair, that's not how Liverpool's game went, but it's an example of a team doing enough to get the victory. And that's what you have to do at this stage of the season, because we're not quite at the run-in yet where things change. We're at that period, certainly for Liverpool, where they've got a League Cup final coming up, an FA Cup game coming up. They've got Europe will be starting in a couple of weeks as well. I think City are in more or less the same boat, apart from the League Cup final. Arsenal, obviously, not in the FA Cup. I wonder who beat them. And they've got the Champions League coming up as well. So it's just a matter of getting the job done. We've seen a lot of times in recent years. February is normally the month where Arsenal would mess it up, wouldn't they, and get knocked out of everything. So you can do really well for 5-6 months, and then it can just go like that. Yeah. And I think for Liverpool, they've just got to keep on getting those wins. That's what they did. And what made it more impressive is that, as we know from our podcast on Friday, they started with 9 players missing. Admittedly, there was one played who was involved, Simicast, that we weren't expecting, and then Alisson obviously dropped out. But then by the end of the game, they lost another 2 in Gravenberch and in Trent Alexander-Arnold. So to get the job done as they did against a Burnley team who are improving, they came from 2-0 down, didn't they, against Fulham to get a point the previous week. And I think they're going to, to be honest, I still think they'll get relegated. I just don't think they've got enough up front, but you'd be a little bit sorry that they'd gone, because at least they're giving it a bit of a proper go. And the fact that they've done that all the way through, just looking at Burnley for a sec, means that over these last 14 games they've given themselves to go for, because I thought in spells they played quite well. And if it wasn't for Kelleher making 2 good saves at important times, one very early on, the second one when Liverpool, they'd just gone 2-1 up, hadn't they? Both one-on-one saves, different in the way that he achieved them. That, he'd made the saves that had Alisson made them, everybody would be like, well, they're the kind of saves that help win your games, win leagues, etc.
Yeah, I think they're not the same Burnley. I think at the start of the season they were trying to play a certain way and getting swatted aside, but they seem to have grown into their game a bit. But they won't pick up the points.
That kind of comes, doesn't it, from the experience of playing, and they've made a couple of signings. I mean, Fofana was quite good, wasn't he? But I mean, the best player I thought in the first game at Boxing Day is the guy who scored, O'Shea. I thought he had a good game against Liverpool at Turf Moor, and he scored at Anfield in front of the Kop. So well done to him.
And that's it for the Burnley podcast. Beth, do you want to go back to talking Liverpool? It's impressive, I suppose, for Liverpool this season that they seem to have the personnel that even when games aren't really going their way, they brought Harvey Elliot off the bench, albeit enforced, but he seemed to have an impact almost immediately. The front three, that they seem to have an impact every game, at least one of them, this time all 3 of them. So Liverpool have those different players in their squad, don't they, capable of turning games, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but that's the hallmark of champions, really, isn't it? Being able to grind out results in different ways. And when you're not necessarily playing well, and Liverpool didn't play well. I don't think that the first half they were quite slow, quite lethargic, looked a little bit tired, the same way that they did against Arsenal the previous week. And then second half, I thought Harvey Elliot was excellent. I thought he changed the game coming on at half time, even though it was an enforced change. Andy Robertson, I thought, really grew into the game as it went on, with Taro Endo as well. So I think, Liverpool just did enough to get the job done, and in the end it was fairly comfortable. I know, as Doyle said there, Burnley, they forced Kelleher into a couple of decent saves, but I think sort of by the hour mark you felt that Liverpool, had firm control of the game and were going to go on and win it. But yeah, I mean, not going back to the Blood Claret podcast about Burnley, but I think they are a very different side. I was quite impressed with them, actually. They can play football, which is, it's always nice when a side comes up, and not nice when they go straight back down playing football. But you can see now why they're sort of sticking with Vincent Kompany, because I did sort of around Christmas time, I did think, why are they not getting rid of him and trying to salvage something and bring someone in. But I think you watch them, at the weekend, and you can see why, because I think they've got a good chance of, if they go down, maybe get a bit more quality in, they could come back up.
Sure, this is the Burnley podcast.
Burnley podcast.
Yeah.
If you've got a question about Burnley, put in the comments. We'll try and come to it.
But also Liverpool were very professional and got the job done in the end.
Nice segue.
Yeah, nice segue. Let's talk Harvey Elliot, because
does he play for Burnley?
yeah,
play for Blackburn. He played for Blackburn. That's close to Burnley. Yeah. Harvey, yes. Now,
Harvey, yeah. I mean, been a strange season for Harvey Elliot, because I feel like when we see him, quite often he seems to have an impact in games. He seems to be quite decisive, but he can't really get in the team from the off quite often. And I think Van Dijk said, didn't he, that he just has to kind of keep his head down and carry on going, and eventually he will get in the team. But I mean, he could come out this season, and if Liverpool do lift silverware, be really crucial to those wins, couldn't he?
Really crucial. Thank you. You said it sounded like crucial.
I nearly said crucial.
You nearly did. Harvey, two things about Harvey. One, he's 20. In fact, he's not 21 until April. I think I'm right in saying that. But he's only 2 appearances off making 100 for Liverpool. So he's still young, but he's got a lot of experience. And I mean, here's the thing, right? He's 20, and he's been playing for a couple of years now for a team who 2 years ago got to the Champions League final and at top of the league, and he was involved. Okay, I know he didn't play. He was in the squad, wasn't he, for the Club World Cup back in 2019, because he'd not long joined. So he's already involved in it. So he's been there for 5 years now. In fact, just coming on to 5 years. It's a lot of experience for a player that age. Going back to Burnley's neighbours, Blackburn, he benefited an awful lot from that loan spell. And just going as an aside, as we tend to do on this podcast, for a very long time, and when a player went out on loan from Liverpool, it was like, that's it, the end. But I think with Harvey, look at Gerald Quanta, he's another one who's gone out on loan and come back and done well. I think if they get the loan spell right now, they are given the opportunity to come in and see what they can do. And I know a lot of that's down to Klopp, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with whoever the new manager is. But Elliot's benefited from that. His season, they played 12 cup games, Liverpool. He started 11 of them. They played 24 league games, and he started 3.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of shows you the difference. He's been getting... There's only him and Darwin Nunez that have been involved in every single game this season in terms of in the matchday squad. I think Nunez didn't come on in one game, which was the Tottenham game where he was about to come on and Jota got sent off and then they couldn't bring him on. But Elliot, he came on. I think almost because he's not playing all the time, that makes him even... You know what he's like as a person. You've seen enough interviews with him. Big Liverpool fan, very committed. He wants to be involved. He wants to make his mark. And when he does come on, he almost always does do something, as you say. I mean, even without the assists, which I think he's only going to get one counted, isn't he? Because the cross took a deflection for the Diaz one. He just brought, tempo. He brought a bit of... He's not the fastest player in the world, but he brings pace in terms of the possession. And one thing that Harvey's very good at is being careful in possession. He uses the ball very, very well. Him and Curtis Jones are the same, actually. The two very, very good with that. That's the one thing that I've been banging on for years about Harvey. The first time I saw him play is first thing you got was like, he knows how to look after the ball and he can control it as well. And when you're in the intensity of a Premier League game like that, if you're saving time doing all that, it all adds up. So that's why he's so important for Liverpool. And the problem he's got is that he hasn't got a position. They tried him out. He has got a position. It's the right side of the midfield 3, but Szoboszlai plays there, and he can also play on the right wing, but Salah plays there. Now we know that they're both not going to play every single game, which is why Harvey's getting his minutes. But if there was a big game like the League Cup final, if they're all fit, he's not playing, and I think he knows that as well. But the fact that he won't be 21 till April, as I say, he's got loads of time on his side. He only has to look at Curtis Jones. He was in and out the team very similar way. The only thing with Harvey's only had that one injury, whereas Curtis obviously had loads. That Curtis we'll come on to in a bit, he's kind of made himself indispensable by being so versatile, and that's one thing that Elliot's got going for him.
Yeah, I think I like Harvey Elliot in games where, and this is probably one of them, Liverpool's seen a lot of the ball in the final third, but not quite translating that into chances, because I think he's very good at finding those little pockets of space.
Well, the second goal is his second assist, first assist. Liverpool's third goal it's an example of that. He's about 4 or 5 yards inside the area, and he still manages to get a ball up and over the defenders not to inside the far post where Nunez heads it in. That's not easy.
I think it's a really important point as well that Ian made about the amount of starts he's had in the league compared to the amount of starts he's had in cup games, because probably one of the biggest criticisms that's been levelled at him this season is that he's maybe not performed as well in games that he started, but there's an argument that in those games he's been playing in a second, even third string Liverpool team in those cup games. He's started probably very few games where Liverpool have had a full complement of players out, and so I think it's hard to be too critical of him, because I think until he gets a run in the team where he's starting 5, 6, 7 Premier League games with the best players around him, I don't think you can really judge how good he is. But unfortunately for him, he's not really going to get that unless injury means that Szoboszlai's out for a prolonged period or Salah's out for a prolonged period. But for him to be just 2 appearances off making 100 at 20, and I think that'll make him, if he gets that 100 soon, that'll be he'll do it in quicker time than Trent Alexander-Arnold and Steven Gerrard, which is no mean feat. And I think as well, you look at Jarell Quansah and Conor Bradley, and we've spoken about them a lot on the pod this season and how brilliant they've been, and it's been very much like a breakthrough season for them, and you still very much think of them as young players who are still learning the game, whereas Harvey Elliott, because he's been at the club for five years now, and he came in when he was 16, you sort of still think that you think he's older than he is, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think even though Conor Bradley and Jarell Quansah are young, they're older than Harvey Elliott. So I think he probably gets unfair criticism at times because people think he's older and more experienced than he is.
John McInerney in the comments said Harvey was the spark the team needed to start the second half. He hustles and makes great decisions when he has the ball, and I think
that's a very good. Actually, that's another thing I was going to say. You compare that to someone like Ryan Gravenberch, who you could argue is more naturally talented in terms of the way that he wants to play the game, but I think his decision making isn't quite there yet. But that comes from the experience of playing games at that level, which Harvey's had.
Yeah. How old, Beth, is Phil Foden?
23.
23. I always think Phil Foden is much younger than he is, but if you look at, I thought Pep managed him very, very well into the Man City team. It was a very slow burn. He wasn't launched into superstardom at 18. He was always sort of in and out of the team until really it was last season.
Didn't have to be though. That's the thing with City. City can afford to do that.
But I think there's
Liverpool
something similar going
on
with Harvey Elliott in the sense of the way that he's been used. He's been used in the front three. He's been used. I mean, it was 2 seasons ago, wasn't it, that he really seemed to start playing a lot more games on the right of the midfield. And
that's kind of the difference.
Came out of the team when he had his injury.
The difference you mentioned about the other teenagers, like less so Trent, but you look at Michael Owen, he's one from past years. Carragher to a certain extent, certainly Steven Gerrard, they were thrown in because we need them. Whereas I know they don't need Harvey Elliott, but there are times when they do need him, if that makes sense.
I think the Curtis Jones comparison is really important as well, because Curtis is 23, 24 this year. Oh no, he turned 23 in January, didn't he? So he's 2.5 years older than Harvey Elliott, and it's only really in the last 9-10 months that he's cemented himself in the team. So for Harvey Elliott to be doing what he's doing now, I'd argue he's maybe ahead of Curtis Jones in terms of his trajectory.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it was decisive for Harvey Elliott, but it was decisive for 3 other players. Diogo Jota, we'll start with him. I mean,
are you worried about him?
I'm not worried about Diogo Jota. I don't think I've ever been worried about Diogo
I don't know, I just was checking. You have concern for certain players.
It's funny with Jota, because I can't say this at the moment. I always had this feeling that I didn't really like him from the start.
But do you mean when he was scoring all those goals right at the beginning? I hate him.
No. But more and more, he's just got this knack, hasn't he? I mean, I know we've talked about it so often, this knack of being involved with goals. I was looking at him and Nunez to talk about them before we started the pod, and I find so Jota's had 23 shots this season, and albeit he's played more, but Nunez has played more, but Nunez has had 64 shots, and Jota has more goals than him.
Well, to be fair, I think 31 of those shots from Nunez hit the post.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's the other thing. Jota hasn't hit the woodwork once, and he's hit it 9 times, Nunez. So it kind of shows you the different types of striker they are, but they complement each other so well.
I think also Jota, he's been playing on the right, hasn't he, recently? Which, with the exception of the Arsenal away game last week, which he wasn't the only one, that we were very, very much below their level. I think he's done all right over there. He scored against Chelsea, didn't he? In fact, that first goal against Chelsea, if you wanted to know what Diogo Jota's like, I've said this before, like as a footballer, that goal gets the pass from Conor Bradley. Sees 2 defenders in front of him and goes, I know what I'll do. I'm just going to run straight at them and see what happens. And he runs straight at them, gets the bounce that, makes his own luck, and then tucks it away. Once he gets into that position, you expect him to score. And I think he's definitely Liverpool's. I'm not sure. We've had this conversation before when Jamie Carragher said could he be Liverpool's best finisher in the Premier League era? Well, no. I think Robbie Fowler's better than that for a start. But he's definitely Liverpool's best finisher who's there now, because he can sometimes look like, not that he's not interested, but he's just not involved. He just not be involved. He can be here, there, and everywhere, and it just looks like ball bounces off him. He's not got the best control sometimes. He's not always careful in possession. But as soon as the goal comes into view, he's like, I had a shot here.
Yeah,
I think
sorry,
his work rate.
by someone who's just put Rim a big LFC hater. two siren emojis in the chat.
That's Paul Goss.
There's no need. There's no need for that at all.
Yeah, shocked me really. I don't think I ever come across a Liverpool hater.
Maybe he thinks I'm you, in which case that's even more offensive.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
sorry, but
what was the point that I was making about Jota? Basically, Jota, when the goals appear, he just turns into a different. And when he first signed, they were like, he's very versatile, can play across the front three. The other thing, though, they said is that what was he calling him, a pressing monster, is what Pep Linders called him. And you add that into his game, and I tell you what, he must be an absolute pain to play against if you're a defender.
Oh, absolutely.
Just leave me alone for 5 minutes.
I think as well, though, going back to the point you made about him maybe not always looking interested or always being involved, and I think that's one thing that he gets slagged off for a little bit, isn't it? His overall game. I think that's something. I remember you saying that he scores a lot of snide goals, and he does have that ability, or he has in the past, to do absolutely nothing.
What's a snide goal?
Do absolutely nothing for 90 minutes and then manage to bag a
That sounds
goal.
like being very efficient with his time.
No, but I'm just on about what LFC hater Joe Rose said.
It's all coming out now, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think his work rate and him being a pressing monster, that's been very apparent the last sort of month or so, especially in the absence of Mo Salah, and deservedly reaping the rewards of that.
I think this is Jota's best
season,
but certainly spell. Like you say, since Salah's gone off to AFCON, I mean, the way he stepped it up, I quite like it. I think he's becoming a bit more of a moaner on the pitch, and that in a good way. You can see him at his teammates sort of telling him to raise standards. I really like the way he's taken the mantle on from Salah, and it'd be interesting to see when Salah comes back how they coexist in the same team, because I think they're going to have some big decisions over. Because Diaz, we know, Klopp likes Diaz. He almost always plays when he's fit. So then, how do you get? Well, you can't get the 4 of them into the same team, but how they'll line up, I think, will be fascinating.
5. There's Gakpo as well.
Sorry, I am forgetting Gakpo, and I like Gakpo a lot. I'm not a big Gakpo hater, but I really love the goal anyway at the weekend, because if you see it, the goalkeeper misses it, and I think there's 3 Liverpool players, and I can't remember who's either side of him, but 2 big lads either side of him, and Jota gets in there, and we know how good he is in the air, but it was just a really good header from a very clever forward. Yes, well, that's a statement made. We'll move on to Darwin Nunez. Right, Darwin Nunez. I was kind of comparing the two and look at the amount of shots he has. The goal involvement he has is off the chart. But just look at that. He's in the top percentile for pretty much everything around goal, and seeing him get another goal at the weekend was I think really well timed. How impressed have you been with him this season? You feel like he's still sort of on an upward trajectory as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as much as I'd love to have Erling Haaland in this Liverpool team in terms of the amount of goals that he scores, I'm not sure there's any player that I would swap Darwin Nunez for at the moment, because, like you say, he contributes so much, doesn't he, even when he's not scoring goals. And I think, I was delighted for him to get on the score sheet on Saturday, because I think there's been quite a few times lately we've spoke about him and spoke about how brilliant he's been, but it's always come with the caveat of he's not quite got his goal, he's hit the post, or he's had, he had the penalty saves against Chelsea. So for him to play really well, because I think he was probably one of Liverpool's better players, certainly in the second half on Saturday. For him to get the goal and it was a tremendous header, wasn't it? It wasn't just sort of like an easy tapping goal. It was when you watch that header back, it was brilliant. So for him to get that, to sort of crown a really accomplished performance, I was really happy for him. And I think you see what it means to him, the way he ran and celebrated. You feel like it was a bit of a weight off his shoulders. I think you're just waiting now for him to go on a run where he scores 3, 4, 5 games in a row. I think that's the next step for him now. I think he's demonstrating a consistency in terms of his performance levels, because I think there's rarely a game goes by where he doesn't have a big impact on the game. But I think it would be nice to see him go on a sort of a scoring streak of 4, 5, 6 games.
So just pick up on something you said. You wouldn't swap him for Mbappe. Or
I said there's few
Bellingham.
players. Well, Bellingham's a completely different player.
Yeah, but you've got 5 forwards. You can just put him in midfield.
I think players who are available to Liverpool at this moment in time, I don't think there's anyone who I would sort of put in there in his place.
His contribution to Liverpool's all-round game, I think, often goes unnoticed, and in the banter era, especially Nunez, has seemed to have been on the receiving end of that more than probably any player in the Premier League over the past 18 months. It goes unnoticed. I think it doesn't by Liverpool supporters, but certainly elsewhere. We've, like you say, we've seen so many times when he hasn't scored, when he's been a big part of creating chances, putting teams on the back foot, just getting the crowd up. I think that's a massive thing, and people don't necessarily always. You don't see that in the highlights, but when you have a player like Nunez whose attitude from the start gets the crowd going, I think that can really set the tone for a good performance. So I think it's great. And I think you're right. I'd like to start seeing him, like Jota, get that, get the third goal in a 3-1 win, get those types of goals that they just get his numbers up.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing them slowly creep up, but I'd love to see him go on a run now of a few games, especially if you're playing the likes of Brentford, Luton. That's when you really want to see Nunez be decisive and make sure that you put those teams to the sword. What about you? You someone said that Nunez is better than Mbappe there in the
At what? Hitting the post. I'll give him that.
What have you made of him? Obviously, you've watched you've watched every minute of Liverpool's football this season.
Apart from the Leicester game.
Apart from which was the Leicester game?
Where they won in the League Cup. I was off there.
Well, yeah, okay. But,
yeah. Also, I probably fell asleep for parts of the games as well. So.
But what have you made of his overall contribution this season?
Well, I mean, I've said from the start of the season that obviously I saw him in the summer, and it's like, well, there's no debate anymore over whether he's good enough to play for Liverpool. Yeah. That's gone because everybody now knows that he is. What I think is quite funny is I think now you're seeing rival, not the players because they get briefed and they do all the analysis they know, but rival fans are sometimes coming up against Liverpool, and Nunez will have a good game and they'll be like, hang on, he's supposed to be rubbish. Yeah. So he's kind of challenging those. I wouldn't say misconception, because there was spells last season where he wasn't particularly good, and that's why he didn't play hardly in the last 10, 11 games of the season when Liverpool went unbeaten. I think he only started 2 of the games, if that. So it wasn't without foundation, but that's all long gone now. Yeah. I mean, it isn't just his goals, but you say he's involved in so much stuff. I mean, it was a typical game, wasn't it, for him? He misses a really good chance towards the end, scores, gets booked for something stupid. And then just, knocks opposing players over, and the crowd will absolutely love him. So, whatever fan you are of any team, if you've got a player who's on there giving 100%, you're always going to take to him. But he then, on top of that, he's starting to make a difference, as Beth said, in games. Even, you look at the Chelsea game where he didn't score, did he? But say he hit the post 15,000 times or whatever it was. He made a massive difference in that game, and playing down. Funny for him. Sorry,
that was one of his best performances this season.
Funny for him is that whenever he then has a good game, or he has a couple of good games either on the left or down the middle. I think we mentioned this before. Is that then he has a bad one, they just move him to the left just to try and get his confidence back, or move it around. So I do think he's a player that, again, going back to if there's a cup final coming up in a couple of weeks, I'd be amazed if he doesn't start.
Oh, he has to start.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. It's a cup final, and now we're talking like he has to start. What does that tell you?
That is why the front three is so fascinating, because let's say Salah, which hopefully will be fit for that game. I mean, it's not a conversation really for today, but it does make me think who starts in that game.
I think on form at the moment, I don't know what sort of order you will put them in, but I think Salah's obviously got to be on the pitch, Nunez has got to be on the pitch, and Jota's got to be on the pitch.
But there's a reason why Klopp wants to come to Diaz.
Yeah.
I think tactically he obviously he helps the shape, doesn't he? And there must be a reason why Klopp picks him in almost every game.
Yeah, and I think lately he's looked a lot closer to the player that Liverpool signs. I think still maybe not quite hitting those heights, and perhaps that should be expected considering that, you know, he's had a really serious injury that he's been coming back from, and obviously the most horrendous personal circumstances off the pitch as well in the last few months. So I think credit to him for getting back to the level he's got to. I think he is infuriating at times because I think that there's moments where you really would just love him to take someone down the line and beat his man in the same way he did when he first came to Liverpool, and sometimes he almost seems a little bit reluctant to do that. But he is a fantastic player, and there is a reason that Jurgen Klopp continues to pick him. I mean, my one concern actually with Nunez at the moment is he has picked up quite a few daft yellow cards lately, and I'm starting to think how many more does he need before he gets a 2-match suspension.
I think it's 2 or 3 off, isn't he?
Yeah, you say that the last thing Liverpool want is him getting that before the Manchester City game, for example, because that's the sort of game you want Darwin Nunez playing. And again, that's probably a testament to how much he's improved this season, because it seems sort of inconceivable that he wouldn't play in that game.
Yeah, and if you look at last season, like I thought Cody Gakpo got all the football because tactically he seems to understand what Klopp wanted from him, whereas Nunez, like you say, at the end of the season, it's almost like they took him out of the team and thought, well, you know what, we'll have to get him up to speed. And they, to their credit, they did that so well in the summer. But now they've got him up to speed. Gakpo can't really get in the team because he's really dropped into the.
He still scored 9 or 10 goals this
season.
Gakpo,
I'm not knocking him, but compared to the levels the other 4 are operating at this season, I mean, Diaz is one, isn't he? I think he's had a strange season, Diaz. Obviously, some really difficult personal problems away from the pitch. But he has been inconsistent at times.
If you go from the Burnley game when Jota came back and Diaz set up Jota for that goal right at the end, have a look at what the 3 of them have done in terms of the numbers. I think Jota's got 8 goal involvements in 10, and Diaz is not far off that as well. And Nunez similar. And just going back to the League Cup final point, I don't think Salah starts. I don't think he starts.
That's a big.
And there's two reasons for that. One, he still hasn't made his comeback yet, and the final's in 11, 12 days, so it's not far. 13 days.
Still 2 games.
Yeah, but it's 13 days off, right? And he hasn't played a game for Liverpool in 6 weeks now. And also in the League Cup, he hardly plays a game anyway, normally. So if there's one game that he can't really complain too much about not starting, it's that one.
I will have you a gentleman's bet.
No.
Right here that he starts that game.
How much?
£5 English.
£5 English. £5 English. There you go. There you go.
Right, but because I think Salah, the personality will start that game.
Okay,
I just can't imagine him not starting. There you go. It's a podcast first. And it's first.
Of course, what will happen literally in training tomorrow? All 3 of the forwards will just run into each other and reel themselves out, just to annoy me.
That's we'll avoid the bet if not everyone is fit.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Starting to regret his decision.
Yeah, he's backtracking.
Me? That helps me. I'm not worried. Right. What else did I have on the agenda? Curtis. Well, Trent's injury first.
Yeah.
That is a worry for Liverpool, isn't it? I mean, they've just got him back. Klopp did say after the game, didn't he, that I think Trent would have carried on had he had his way. But it was a knee.
It's a strange one because they quite clearly can't. They're just concerned. I think if they'd only had like 2 players out injured, they would have let him play on. But they had so many, they just went, nah, we cannot be doing with somebody else being out for ages, especially with, the right back situation being what it is at the moment. Although that could easily change in the next couple of days anyway. So I think they're just taking no chances and segueing again into Curtis, who moved to right back and did very, very well.
It's not the first time he's played right back this season in the game that you didn't see.
Exactly, yeah. First time I saw him play.
Right back against Leicester in the League Cup. But, I mean, the levels Curtis Jones has put in this season, I think, has been remarkable. But versatility like that, I mean, is just... It's huge for a Klopp team because Klopp demands that of his players. But I think it just shows a maturity, doesn't it, in Curtis Jones's game?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's... In one sense, I think being a a sort of a bit of a utility player or a versatile player can work against you when you're a young player coming into a team, because, you know, like we've said with Harvey Elliot, what is his best position? And I think with Curtis Jones, you know, he obviously came through as a winger, didn't he, from the academy, and there was maybe a little bit of time when you thought, where is his best position? But I think he's actually turned that into a strength, and like you say, that versatility to be able to play at right back and not really put a foot wrong, it is hugely encouraging. I mean, I wouldn't want him starting there in a huge game against Manchester City, for example, but the fact that he can turn his hand to that is really useful, particularly considering the problems Liverpool have had with injury issues at fullback this season. So yeah, it's a real credit to him, and yeah, I think a year ago even, people were probably questioning, does he have a long-term future at Liverpool? Is he going to be a regular fixture in this team? And I think now he's probably one of the first names on the team sheet, which again is huge credit to the work that he's done.
I think as well that versatility allowed Liverpool, albeit it was an enforced change, but allowed Liverpool to get another attacking player on to overload Burnley and eventually make the breakthrough. It was, having that in his locker is invaluable, isn't it?
Yes.
That's not the point of the podcast, Doyle.
I've spoken enough already. There'll be people complaining about me talking on it.
Let's talk Alonso then, because we're moving on from the game now. I think we've covered every big theme from that game. We want to talk Xabi Alonso. Doyle, a massive win for him at the weekend, moving 5 points clear of the Bundesliga. I don't think people quite... I was talking to Gorsty on the phone before about this. I was thinking, don't think people quite recognise the achievement that would be if he can beat, and there's still a long way to go. And we've seen teams with bigger leads collapse in the Bundesliga, and Bayern's machine sort of.
Do you mean Dortmund?
Through their Dortmund, yeah. but he'd be the first manager, wouldn't he? Correct me if I'm wrong, to break up that. I think Bayern Munich have won it every season since Klopp departed.
Yeah.
So he'd be the first manager to break that monopoly up. Second, they call them Leverkusen. Not Neva, because that wouldn't work.
Leverkusen, which is interesting because obviously they're German, and that's not the German word for never. Yeah. I don't know what the German word for never is. I did German at GCSE, but I know it's not never.
I don't think that's the interesting bit. I think the interesting bit would be if he won the title with.
No, I think. Excuse me. Well, let's ask our producer which was more interesting.
No comment. But it. You know, I think it would be such a massive achievement, but they won that game. They won it in impressive fashion. I mean, what he's doing there is really, really impressive. And it's not just because he's an ex-Liverpool player that he's being linked. Where with Gerrard, I often thought just the emotional connection was the link.
Did win the league with Rangers, to be fair.
He did. But with Alonso, it seems to be a really good body of work that means that he is.
Well, he's only been there. He's not even been there. Is it a year now? Is it year? Yeah. So, I mean, by the end of the season, it'll be 18 months. You know, so I could count the calendar years, months even. And with Alonso, it's funny, if you want to know an example of how big a deal it is that Bayer Leverkusen are doing that well, if they'd have lost that game, they'd have gone to second. And they've had this season where they've not lost a single game and drawn about 2 or 3, and that's it. And still they've not been able to get away from Bayern Munich until winning that game, which obviously 3-0. Fairly convincingly. Always good to see a goal where Chris Beasley, our colleague, would be made up at that last goal because the goalkeeper had gone up and left his goal unattended, which is a word we don't say a lot. But yeah, I think for Alonso, the big thing is what's going to happen over the next couple of months, because he's got to get this over the line now. They're still in the cup, aren't they? I mean, you would expect Bayern to win almost every single game between now and the end of the season because of who they are. Yeah, and it's just it'll be an interesting test of his. It is a test of his managerial ability, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's one thing, to set up a team, you know to be this, that, and all the other, and the players, but then it's actually the last bit of and now we need to try and win something. I need to take a team, certainly one against the odds, to go and win something. That's the hard bit. Yeah,
but since I think Houllier was appointed, Liverpool have always appointed managers with silverware on their CV. Rodgers was the one, wasn't he? That didn't have. I think did he have the championship?
No, I don't think he did.
They got through the playoffs, didn't they? So I suppose
did Rodgers win anything?
Roy Hodgson. You can't argue with his record at Malmo, can you? Or what are those other? What's the Swiss team whose name I can't pronounce?
Neuchâtel Xamax.
That's it. Yeah, you can't argue with his record there. But they Rodgers was the one, and I always felt from the beginning with Rodgers there wasn't the support from him from fans because he didn't have that on his CV. Whereas Alonso, if he can get it, I
think with Rodgers as well is that going to Anfield, taking over at Liverpool, he was like using it as a finishing school for himself as a manager, and you can't really do that. And I think while Alonso is obviously a young manager, he's not young at dealing with massive teams because he's been at Bayern, Real Madrid, and Liverpool. And I've mentioned this before. It's the Zidane thing, Zidane taking over at Real Madrid after about a year at Castilla, I think it was, and it was like, well, what's he doing that for? He's had no experience. He's like, well, yeah, but he's played for Real Madrid for a lot of years. He knows exactly what that dressing room's like. He knows exactly what to expect. He knows all about the pressure. So he's probably the best person who could probably do it. There might be better managers low down the league at getting things, from teams who shouldn't really be doing that. But that doesn't really help you when you walk into somewhere like Real Madrid. And I think obviously Liverpool aren't set up the same way as Real Madrid, but Alonso will know exactly what to expect. Whereas perhaps somebody else who's linked with the job perhaps does not.
Yeah, I look at Alonso and I think, obviously when Liverpool got Klopp, he was one of the most sought after managers on the planet. Him and Ancelotti were the two that I think most Liverpool fans were sort of wishing for at the time when he came in. But Klopp, you look at Klopp's record, he won 2 Bundesliga titles, the German Cup. He obviously got to the Champions League final, ended in heartbreak. His personality was the sort of, almost as beyond the trophies, it was his personality that was the unique selling point. Alonso, and he's also taken Mainz up, Alonso's record, if he does win the Bundesliga, won't be too dissimilar to Klopp's. He'd have 1 Bundesliga title with a team that was massive underdogs, taking a team from also runs to title challenges and winners. He took Real Sociedad B. It was their first promotion, I think, in 50 years to their second division in Spain. So that's sort of your Mainz. So, and then he has the personality and the affection with the Liverpool crowd. So it does sort of all make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's weird really, because I think usually when there's sort of a manager leaving, you have a list of 5 or 6 candidates who you feel have maybe sort of really strong or potentially really strong contenders. And I think some of the candidates on the market now, Zidane is proven that he can win trophies at Real Madrid, but I don't necessarily think he would be the right fit for Liverpool. And I think Alonso might not have won as much. How many Champions Leagues has Zidane won as manager? 3, is it?
I think it was 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he won the 3 on the trot.
Yeah.
So even though sort of the silverware sort of trumps what Alonso has done so far, I think the fact that he has the potential to do something really, really special this season, coupled with that sort of the romantic element of he's a player who was adored by Liverpool fans and will therefore be probably given a little bit more time, I think, if things don't go to plan. And I think as well, this Liverpool team is still quite new, isn't it? It's still sort of in its early stages, which is why it's so impressive that they're where they are this season, why Ian Doyle perhaps thought they were going to finish 5th. So to bring in an exciting young manager as well, hopefully to be able to sort of make his real sort of mark on the team would be really exciting.
Yeah, someone in the comments has said, do you think Bayern might try and snatch him before Liverpool do? And Bayer Leverkusen's chief executive said at the weekend that he thinks that he will end up staying put.
He's got his bound to say that, isn't he?
Well, I don't know, because sometimes in German clubs, I think they're quite.
They have to say stuff like that
but
they have to say stuff like that when they are still competing on 3 fronts. And the other complication is that Bayer Leverkusen could well end up playing Liverpool in the Europa League.
True.
So
Absolutely.
they can't. They're not going to say anything.
The point I was trying to get to is, do you think Liverpool have a bigger, and if they do go for Alonso, they have a bigger fight in their hands, perhaps to persuade him, because he is quite. Obviously, the Liverpool job will be very attractive to him, but it won't be the only job offer, I'm sure, that will come his way. And secondly, he does seem quite a sensible guy, and seems. I remember Klopp being linked with a number of clubs. I mean, he famously turned United down, didn't he? Or did they turn? I think he turned United down earlier in his career because he didn't feel he was ready. Alonso almost strikes me as that sort of. He'll have the confidence in his own ability to say no, not yet, if he doesn't feel like it's the right time. Do you think there's a chance this could be quite a big fight to persuade him?
Not really, because whoever takes over is going to end up getting a really good Liverpool team, which is unusual, because the last time somebody came from the outside and had a good Liverpool team to take over is never. So, there you go.
I think in a way, Liverpool. I think certainly if he wins the Bundesliga, Liverpool is probably the perfect club for him, because I think you go to Bayern and instantly the expectation, particularly if they've not won it the year before, is to win the league. That's sort of a non-negotiable. Where it's not quite the same as Liverpool. Liverpool, obviously, fans want you to win the league, but if you don't, it's not a crisis. Where at Bayern. So I think the only other club that could sort of trump Liverpool to it would be Real Madrid. Now they extended Ancelotti's contract last year, I want to say, I think.
Certainly was recently.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
fairly recently. And I almost think that at this stage of his career, Real Madrid might be too big for him. I think, not that he wouldn't be capable of doing the job, he could go there and be a huge success, but I think Liverpool is big enough that it can, really elevate his status and take him to the next level as a manager, but not big enough that it's going to ruin his career if it doesn't all go to plan.
Yeah.
Also, I think he's got a greater affinity for Liverpool than he has at Real Madrid and Bayern Munich.
He has a great affinity for Liverpool. Do you think so? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Not Real Madrid?
Nope.
No. Why did you say that?
I've just said that.
I was going to ask you before we move on from Alonso.
I based that
obviously-
on, I saw an interview when he was talking about it. I can't remember where I saw it, but he definitely did say.
Yeah. Well, you will be one of the people old enough here to have dealt with Alonso as a player.
Yes.
What was he like?
Would you like to hear, given the fact I was going to say funny story, but now that the bar's been set so high, not funny story.
What was the bar set so high by?
With the whole Leverkusen thing, yeah. It's not.
I don't think that if you tune into this podcast for comedy, I don't know whether that would be a cup of tea. But anyway, go on.
When we used to speak to him in the mix zone, because obviously his English wasn't absolutely brilliant. It's very good now, by the way. I have to say. It was very good by the time he left. Yeah. But he would always be concentrating very much on what you were asking him. So the look on his face was always as though he was talking to an idiot. Like he thought I was one, which to be fair, he's not far off. But
it's the same look we're both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and anybody watching this at the moment. But no, as I say, he was very, very good, very knowledgeable, very polite, which I've always got a lot of time for. Yeah. Politeness from footballers, and
looks a polite man, doesn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Very stylish as well.
Yeah, he's a. What did he say? Dreamboat? Should we say? Is he a dreamboat?
He's a gorgeous man.
He is, basically, yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
And I think as well, there was a lot made of the weekend about after that win and bringing his backroom staff onto the pitch and making sure they got sort of a round of applause from the fans as well, which is a very Klopp thing to do.
A lot of Arsenal fans made a big deal of that, didn't they? Saying, "Oh, look at this. This is why I'm never having a go at them." And well, he didn't pick up a camera and start snapping people and dancing along to ABBA, did he?
But I think there's probably a sense that he's a very Liverpool manager, and maybe this is maybe a bit too romantic, but that transition from Bill Shankly to Bob Paisley to a enigmatic manager, but still a little bit quieter, not quite as big a character. There maybe are some parallels between Klopp and Alonso in that sense.
I'm all in on Alonso's. Just very quick question, Alonso themed. I remember his debut very, very clearly. It was Norwich, wasn't it, at Anfield, and just the way he sprayed the ball around was like, it was one of those debuts that you went, wow, you almost the second he got the ball, sprayed a couple of passes around, you thought this guy has got great class. Do you remember his debut?
I can't remember.
No. I was just going to ask, are there any other players' debuts like that you remember from the moment they got the ball? You're thinking, oh God, they've got a player here.
Harvey Elliot. I've mentioned it before, yeah. But to be fair, that was against Oldham in the EFL Trophy. Yeah, not quite the same.
Yeah. Any bigger names than
was Darwin Nunez in the Community Shield?
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking like, he's going to be the greatest player ever at that point. To be fair,
I was when he whipped his shirt off.
That's a good question there. Talk between yourselves and have a think.
Gosh. Trying to think of...
We can't have dead space. I'll talk.
What I will tell you, I was going to say, I can tell you what his best performance at Liverpool was, and that was against Everton. Everton in the 3-1 derby where Liverpool Gerrard got sent off really early on, and then it was up to him to step it up, and I thought he was very, very good on that day. That was his best
Virgil
game.
van Dijk.
Virgil van Dijk
scored against Everton on his debut, didn't he?
Yeah, but that was very much like a goal a moment. With Alonso, it was more like from the moment he got the ball. This is what I'm wrong about, and it wasn't his debut, so it kind of doesn't really count.
Oh, brilliant. So what are you talking about now?
I remember Andy
his
Carroll
debut was against Tottenham, wasn't it?
It
was Tottenham, wasn't it? Away?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't at that one either.
Home debut, sorry, I was talking about. But I remember Andy Carroll scoring twice against Man City and thinking, yeah, we got the next Shearer. Lovely.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was fully on board with Andy Carroll. I really thought Liverpool had a great player.
There's nothing wrong. Well, again, what did he do?
He scored a great goal at Wembley that would be a very good memory for me. So yeah.
Who was Thiago's debut against? I remember his first few times I saw him play, thinking like, wow, he's a different gravy.
Thiago came on against Chelsea.
Yeah,
they got coronavirus.
Yeah,
Diaz, he's one.
Yeah,
he had a good first game.
The great name, Spit Roasted Penguin, has said didn't Andy Carroll. Twice in his home debut against City 3-0. Well, Peter, yeah.
Can we just not dwell on that?
He did. Scored a great header and a long-range left-footed effort, and I thought, great left foot, great in the air. Liverpool have got some player here, put him together with Suarez, and nothing will stop us. A lot of things stopped us, but yeah, Anyway, quick before we wrap this up. Thanks, Spit Rose, for that one. Blue cards. You want to talk blue cards?
Blue cards, ridiculous idea. Sin bin's not a bad idea, but only if they're going to replace yellow cards, which they never will. Having another card just makes the game even more complicated and puts more power into the referee's hands. And when they should be concentrating on streamlining the rules so they can implement them more effectively. Next question.
Well, you're the one that insisted on asking that question. I've got two what we call in Liverpool Wolves alongside me, so I would.
Hang on, whoa. You're from Runcorn.
I'm leading to something. I'm certainly not from Runcorn. I'm leading something there, but I thought you might have both been in favour of sin bins.
Well,
Because we're from rugby league town.
yeah, basically, it doesn't really work like that. And the one problem with the sin bins in rugby league is that referees can sometimes hide behind them rather than sending players off for offences that they should have been. Because what they can do then is put them on report or sin bin them, and then they can deal with them later on.
At this moment in time, the relationship that football clubs and fans have with referees and officiating in general does not need to be made any more complicated. I think Jurgen Klopp said on Saturday, didn't he? It'd be like the Wild West if you introduced a third card, and it would imagine the length of the debates that would be had about officiating.
Be longer than this podcast.
It would.
I just think they just cannot make officials' lives more difficult, and by introducing something like that, they do. I mean, I still think VAR was meant to make their lives easier. It's made it much harder because now we all get another look at something and they get another chance to make a mistake, don't they? So I think it wasn't perfect the way it was, but I preferred it pre-VAR. If you put another layer into it, it's got.
Don't mind the offsides of VAR. They're pretty much.
I think they need to bring in.
Yeah, but that's
white
sort of
ones.
like,
Exactly.
even though I don't even love that because it's so,
But it is.
But it's scientific at least.
Yeah.
It's like the goal line, isn't it?
They need to bring in the automated offsides, don't they? The ones that you have at major tournaments. I don't know why. I know a lot of clubs voted against that, didn't they, for some reason? But I think they need to bring that in. But that's a different story for a different day.
Because AI, isn't it? Can't trust AI.
We'll give the final word to Spit Roasted Penguin before we
Can you
sign
just
off.
stop saying?
Well, no,
please?
he said you guys are filthy minds. You two. Spit roast can be eaten. Oh wait, is that worse? Okay, well,
Who's eating a penguin? Apart from unless it's a chocolate one.
yeah,
there you
There you go.
But not a breakaway. R.I.P. breakaways.
Yeah, R.I.P. breakaways.
Sad day. That was a sad time. That was a blow.
Day. Yeah, it was. Right. Before we go, where can we find you? In St.
In the
Helens.
office for the
Yeah,
2
in the
hours.
office, yeah.
I am on Twitter at Ian Doyle Sport, and I'm also on Instagram and Threads at Ian_Doyle_sport.
Lovely. Beth, where can we find you?
Just on Twitter at Beth_Lindop.
Yeah. At Joe Rimmer88 on X, not Twitter.
It's Twitter.
Very
no one
2024.
calls it X.
Thank you for listening. We'll be live again on Friday. We'll be in between with different podcasts, but live every Monday, Friday on the Blood Red podcast. Please give us a like, follow, subscribe, download our app. It's really good. And thanks for all your support. We'll be back then. See you then. Bye-bye.